On today's episode of Car Shenanigans, I'm going to be getting the engine out of my Boxster 2.7T. Gross weather, days like this, I'm so glad I've got a garage to work in. Didn't used to be the case when I started this project. I'm halfway through stripping the engine in preparation to get it out. Drained all the coolant, most of it ended up on the floor as usual. Been draining the oil, had to remove the oil filter because last time when I dropped the engine down into the pit to get enough clearance, the filter was fouling and I had to go in sideways, so I'm learning lessons from there. Exhaust is off, got to take the downpipes off. Most of it's apart now. I need to just basically drop the mounts and disconnect with the power steering, and it should be ready to come out. I'm not sure whether I take the gearbox off first and then try and sort of balance the engine with my transmission jack and sort of lower it down as far as I can into the pit and then wheel it back, or if I drop them down as one unit, but then I'll probably have to put this metal bar across here to support the gearbox. I could do with two of these, to be honest, but I'll have to make do. One quirk when I take the engine out in this car, so I've got to take the inlet manifold off, which you wouldn't have to do normally on an Audi. Reason being, I've got my cables there for the gear selector, and they run underneath the inlet manifold. I did them that way because Porsche just sort of left them hanging over the top with big rubber insulation on them, and they basically weren't connected to anything, just sort of loose in the engine bay, and they look absolute cack. So I wanted to hide them away really. It's a bit fiddly to get in for the inlet manifold. I'll be lying on this on my belly and reaching over. Could take the roof off, which would make it a lot easier, but I don't really want the hassle of that because I've got to find somewhere to put it then, and running out of space in this garage. Got stuff everywhere. It's an engine from a Mercedes CLS. Got an engine from a Cayenne V8, so I could do with getting rid of both of those because I need the space. That's where I'll be working on the engine that comes out of this box there, because it's the only bit of space I got left. So hopefully I can turn it around quick, otherwise I'm not going to be able to move in this garage. Right, I'm at the point now where I'm starting to lower the engine. I've moved the car back as far as it'll go in the garage, whilst I can still get down into the pit. I've got my beam there, is just behind the engine, but that chain is really just to stop the engine falling on my head. I'm basically lowering it down with a transmission jack. But if I need to reposition the jack or anything, that chain will take the weight. I find it easier to remove an engine on a mid-engine car just on a flat piece of ground. What I used to do was lift the shell up and then just wheel the engine out. So I've got my transmission jack here. That is under the sump. So that's taking all the weight. I'm just slowly dropping it down bit by bit. Then I've got this sort of scissor jack that I'm lowering the gearbox down with, but I can obviously only drop the gearbox down to this height because I've got this metal bar. I could have done with 2 transmission jacks ideally. So once I get to that height, I think I'm going to need to I don't know, to be honest, maybe take the whole weight with this transmission jack, move it over slightly, so I can drop it further down into the pit, because that bar's not gonna, it's gonna be too high, so that's not gonna work. What makes it a little bit more difficult doing this is because the engine and gearbox as a unit have got 3 mounts. You got one either side of the gearbox, then you got this mount here at the front of the engine. That's how they are a standard Boxster, and then that's how I've retained it. I've made a bracket that bolts to the engine there, and so it works fine. I've got loads of space. People usually make a subframe that runs down either side when they're doing engine swaps, and then you haven't got any space to the side of the engine, so I'm happy with it how it is. But because it's one unit, what I'd like to do really is support the engine, take the gearbox off, and then drop the engine down. But you can't move the car once you've split the unit, because this doesn't really roll. I haven't got much space either side, and so it wouldn't be any good. And to drop the gearbox off it first, I'd need to be further over this way in the pit, so I could physically get the gearbox out, and so I'd have space to work on it, because it's a real tight squeeze to get in and out. So it's a pain in the arse, to be honest, getting this engine out. I wish I had the lift. It'd probably take a couple hours with a lift, but I've got to work with what I've got, so I'll get it done. The jack under the gearbox did prove to get in the way, as I thought, so I've taken that out, and now the engine's just hanging from the chain above, and I've got the transmission jack as low as it's going to go, and the plan is I'm just going to lower the engine and gearbox as far down as I can. It's likely to sit on there, and the gearbox likely to sit on one of the steps, and then hopefully I can just roll the car forward to clear them. That's the plan, but once I've lowered it, I can't get back in the pit, so hopefully this all goes how I want it to. had to take a few bits off the engine so I could drop it all the way down into the pit. An actuator and a couple of AC pipes. Small Mercies. I nearly got the aircon gassed up a couple of weeks ago, but there was a problem with the machine, so I'm glad about that. So the engine's dropped all the way down in the pit now. It's as far as it'll go is sitting on the transmission jack, so I'll be taking the chain off and then it's time to roll the car forward. I've got the car sitting on these skates. The only reason for that is to give me a little bit of extra ground clearance, because I'm concerned the suspension frames by there are going to foul the engine as it's rolling forward. It should be alright now. So plan is roll it forward and then pull the engine out. Fingers crossed. So they look quite close, but I think they're both going to clear just. So it's out, got clearance, time to pick it up and move it to the side. That's the engine out. Got a reasonable amount of space. It's quite handy that the car's on those skates, so you just slide it across to give myself a bit more room. So in the next video I'll be pulling the engine apart. So thanks for watching. Click subscribe if you enjoy what you see. Bye.